Hello, my love. Welcome to another video that I'm recording actually for the second time because the first time my microphone malfunctioned. So I'm here yet again, but nevertheless, I'm just as excited to record this video another time. And I hope that you're having or had a wonderful day wherever you are as well. Let us talk today about how to deal with your emotions and use them as a tool to your advantage. I'm not gonna lie to you when I tell you that the last time that I crashed out was in January, so 6 months ago. And that happened simply because, as I already mentioned, I use my emotions as my tool. I see them as a guide that can benefit me, and I use my emotions to my advantage instead of seeing my emotions as something that I have no power or control over. And I think those are some of the little advantages that I gained after growing up in a toxic household. Because of that, I became quite observant and interested in them, because knowing how to read the room was essential for my survival, and therefore I was able to create this sort of distance to my emotions, which I am encouraging you to do as well. But before we dive deeper into this matter, I just quickly wanted to express my thankfulness and my gratitude towards you and for showing so much love to my last video. I was quite overwhelmed and still am by the warmth that I'm feeling inside of my heart from knowing that there are so many people out there who found my last video useful, and it just truly means a lot to me to know that through the pain I experienced, that the knowledge that I could share can be of use to you and can guide you through your day. And thank you even more for every single one of you who reached out to me asking me for guidance and advice. I definitely don't want to position myself as a guide or advisor nor a coach. I'm simply a person that is sharing their findings from their own personal journey. But nevertheless, I'm truly grateful that some of the advice that I could offer you guys was of use to you as well, and that you trusted such personal and intimate stories with me. I feel like a lot of people have experienced this moment in their life as well. I was going through a harder time, and I was, as often, crying in my room, feeling completely overwhelmed by life and by my circumstances. But that night, there was suddenly a shift. I just felt like everything inside of me went completely still. There was not a single thought within me, there was not a single feeling inside of me, and everything that I had been crying about simply stopped mattering to me. So I went to sleep thinking that this is just a weird state that I've got myself into after crying for hours. But then when I woke up the next morning, I realized that this feeling was still there. I still had thoughts and feelings inside of me, but it felt like they were distant. It felt like I was just packed in a big blanket and everything around me was kind of muffled down. It felt like I was now just observing these emotions and thoughts, and as they would come and I would simply let them be there, they would also leave just as quickly. And I only realized this years later, when I had already started my healing journey and was working on my meditation practice, that this is quite a common practice that people consciously practice during their meditation practice, which is to learn how to observe your thoughts, to allow your thoughts to come into your being but not identify yourself with them, to not allow your thoughts or emotions to carry you away with them, but instead imagine yourself as if you're simply laying in a meadow and observing the sky and seeing all of those clouds. You observe one cloud, and once it goes over the horizon, you simply let it go. And the same applies to your emotions and thoughts as well, because truth is, you are not your thoughts. If your thoughts would truly be a part of you, they would stick with you from the day that you were born and stay with you till the day that you leave this earth. But because that is not the case, and because your thoughts are something that you can observe, that can only mean that they do not belong to you. So while you can't control what kind of thoughts you have, you certainly can control your reaction to them. And you do that by becoming the observer, by stopping yourself from identifying with every single thought and emotion that you have. And I do hope that this concept is not too hard to grasp. So if you're confused by any of this, all I'm trying to say is that your thoughts have no power over you. Because if that would be the truth, you wouldn't be able to control yourself at all. But we have all had intrusive thoughts, right? And how many times do we actually pursue actions after having these intrusive thoughts? We often tend to hold ourselves back or just let this thought or emotion be there. And that alone is proof to you that you certainly can control your emotions and the way you react to them. In fact, you always decide how you will react to your thoughts and emotions. Do you know, for example, those moments where you spill your coffee and then there's just this 1/2 second where you freeze before you react? that is the moment where you are making the conscious decision on how you will react towards your emotions and your thoughts. Here I would invite you to simply observe those moments. When something happens to you, try to catch that little glimpse of where you slightly freeze before you react, and simply get to know the state of being. And once you learn to catch yourself in these little split seconds before your reaction, you get the chance to observe your emotions. And I'm sure that you will soon learn that your emotions reveal everything about you. And that is why it is the most powerful tool that you can have when you're working with yourself. So instead of pushing your emotions away and asking yourself how you can stop feeling this way, I invite you to rather shift your focus and ask yourself what this emotion is trying to show you. This will allow you to not just only experience your emotions and thoughts, but instead learn how to deal with them so it's beneficial to you, so that your emotions support you and help you grow. And I had mentioned a tip in my previous video where I would, after heavier arguments with my family members, simply sit down and ask myself all kinds of questions about the situation and how it made me feel, and especially why it made me feel that way. I do dive deeper into this topic in my previous videos, so if you haven't seen that, feel free to take a look at it, but no pressure at all. With this, I wanted to understand what these emotions are trying to show me so that I can grow and finally break the pattern. That is why I love to think of this as inner alchemy, because you get to turn your pain into self-discovery, which will only benefit you and even the relationships around you as well. So for example, if somebody belittled you and talked badly about you, and now in the evening you're laying in bed and it seems like the situation cannot let you go, you think about what you could have said that would have been a better reply, or what you shouldn't have done, or their words simply keep on circling in your mind. But that is exactly the moment where you get to ask yourself the question on why is it still with you? What is it about the situation that stuck with you so much that you are still thinking about it this evening or even years later? So if it bothered you that they talked badly about you, why exactly was that the case? Was it because you don't see yourself as worthy either? Or is it because you see yourself as being better than anyone else? But then again, you can ask yourself, why do you think this way? And that is how a situation that seemed not very beneficial to you can turn around and become a big benefit to you, because you get to dig deeper into your being, layer after layer, and understand yourself better and see all of the different parts that you still may need to work on or want to work on. And as I already mentioned, with this, you get to turn your emotions into a wonderful tool that you can use for your own self. Another thing that I have noticed is that I truly believe that at the end of the day, there is no true good or bad emotion that you're experiencing. It is us humans who decide to label emotion as being good or bad. But at the end of the day, all of them are just neutral emotions that all have the same energy. So if we say that emotions are simply energies, the question should rather be, how do we direct these energies so that they can be of advantage to us? And I actually have one wonderful example of this, which happened to me last year. I was involved in a situation that left me feeling quite angry, and it had been a long time since I had felt so much anger within me, because usually when I'm just angry, I get sad and then I cry. But this time, because the intensity of this anger that I was feeling was so new to me, instead of pushing it away or directly reacting to it by lashing out, I wanted to experiment with this emotion. And at this point, I invite you to invite more playfulness into your life and into your emotions. Not everything always has to be that serious. And if you're experiencing your emotions, try to play around with them. So instead of pushing my anger away and trying to get rid of it, I asked myself, what could I create with this? And I just had this big urge inside of me to move my body. And I recently had started running, so I decided to go for a run and see how much this anger can carry me forwards as I'm running, and compare it to the times while I was running when I was not angry. And I was just really curious and wanted to experiment with my body and see how I can direct all of this anger into this act of running. I actually ended up running for double the time that I usually did without taking any breaks. And as I was running, I truly envisioned how I'm putting all of this anger into my legs to kind of allow myself to run faster. And after my run, after I had used my anger to fuel my running, it had actually completely disappeared. And that is when I realized that you can use your anger to push yourself forwards physically. So you can work out, go for a run, maybe even clean sometimes. That helps people quite a lot as well, I've heard. But not only that, you can also use that anger to finally set a boundary that you have been putting off, or finally have this harder conversation that you have been also afraid to have. Anger is not just this force that is filled with hatred and negativity. It can be a very wonderful tool to push you forward. And I actually made myself a little list where I wrote down all of these emotions and how I used to deal with them and what they actually thought to me while I was experiencing them, and I would love to share them with you. So when I was experiencing sadness, I used this time to reflect and reconnect with myself. For me, being sad was a time where I would slow down, and with that I noticed how much more present I became in my daily life. And that allowed me to appreciate the little moments in life that I usually so easily missed. Those moments when after a hard day I get to finally lay down in bed and feel the bed holding me, the warm showers that I would take that made me feel like I was being held in an embrace, or the cup of tea that warmed my body from the inside, were all things that I got to notice in a much deeper and rawer way when I was sad. So I invite you to use your sadness as a time of reconnection with yourself and reflecting on your own inner world and see what's going on in there. But of course, be gentle with yourself and also know that you can tap out of these practices at any time if you feel like it's getting too much for you. So during times of sadness, I invite you to rest, journal, create art, or sometimes maybe even cry, because that feels good at times as well. I used to have a really hard time with letting my sadness go, because back in those times when I was living in these circumstances, the sadness was the only thing that kind of reminded me of my aliveness. It was around so much in me and around me that at some point it kind of became my comfort zone. Allow your sadness to simply be there and sit with you like a friend that has come over after a long time. But most importantly, allow your friend to go back home again once it's ready to go. Another really wonderful emotion that I really enjoy, actually, as twisted as this may sound, is shame. I find shame one of the most revealing emotions that you can feel, because it shows you how much you have grown. You wouldn't feel shame about past moments in your life if you wouldn't have grown. Instead of tying shame to a negative emotion, I see it as a wonderful moment, and I appreciate it so very much, because as I said, I just get to understand that now that I know better, now that I have gained experience and learned from it, I understand now that I would have handled the situation differently. So when you're experiencing moments of shame yourself, ask yourself how you would have handled the situation differently. A sentence that I wrote into my journal that I really enjoyed was, "Shame can be a teacher, not a prison." And I invite you to hold on to that. And lastly, one of the bigger emotions that I've also used to experience and still experience quite a lot in my everyday life is anxiety. Last month, I actually had to take a very spontaneous solo trip to Berlin, and I had never been in Berlin before, and I had actually only heard horror stories about it, so I never truly planned to go there. But since my passport was about to expire, I didn't have any other choice. I started to overthink about every single thing that I would need to go through or would need to do. But then, instead of just stressing over it, I decided to use my anxiety as a way to plan ahead. And I want to make a distinction, because I wasn't trying to control the circumstances. I just tried to plan ahead and prepare myself for the situation that I would go through. A lot of the times when I'm feeling anxious, I tend to see the worst case scenario in my head, and I often interpret or imagine these things to be much worse than they actually turn out to be. So in moments like these, when I was preparing myself for my journey mentally, it was never about truly having a plan or control, but instead showing my mind that it is actually not as bad as I imagine it to be. And at the end of the day, it turned out to be exactly that. I was worried about not finding my bus connection, about missing my bus connection, and missing the appointment at the embassy. But what ended up happening was that I simply arrived at my bus station, my bus came immediately, I got into it, and I got off of it right at the embassy, and I made it on time, and everything went completely smooth. So as I was standing in front of the embassy, I used this time to remind myself and prove to myself once more that I should not always listen to my anxious thoughts. So as you're going through moments like these, you are not only getting to know yourself better, but also the people around you. So while you're trying to understand yourself, your patterns, and why you are reacting to situations or emotions a certain way, you start to understand others as well, because you notice the same patterns in them as well. People become much less confusing, which makes life easier for you too. You start to notice when fear hides behind anger, when sadness hides behind irritation, when loneliness is hiding behind attention seeking, and when shame is hiding behind perfectionism. It helps you to understand when certain emotions and words are actually directed to you and when somebody is projecting something onto you. People might become irritated by your success, But that is only because they feel stuck themselves. Or sometimes your openness and vulnerability can be irritating to someone, but that could also point to the fact that they are rejecting their own vulnerability. Maybe because they have been hurt in the past and now fear to be as vulnerable and open as you. And that again shows you how people operate on different layers. I am running out of storage again, and that is why I just quickly want to end this video by saying that your emotions are not happening against you, they're happening for you. Life will always bring emotions with itself, so instead of fighting them, allow them to guide you. And with that, I do hope that this video could be of some use to you, and I'm sending you a lot of love from the bottom of my heart.